Day 1 of the Oregon Trail. So excited! I have gathered 2,000 pounds of food, a strong oxen, a nice wagon, and I am prepared for 3,200 kilometers and 6 months journey to a better life.
It's Oregon country. This place is awesome. There are pigs running under the great Oregon trees, round and fat, already cooked, with knives and forks stuck into them so you can cut off a slice whenever you are hungry. Just kidding, but this place is pretty cool.
The train has reached our first checkpoint, Chimney Rock.
Whoa!
Is a finger of real clay jutting nearly 500 feet into the western Nebraska sky. There are mostly Latter-day Saints here, but plenty of other types of people looking for a better life in the valley.
Hi, I'm a saint.
Travelers wrote in their journals just like me. Here the scenery is remarkable, interesting, and romantic. It produces an impression as if we are bordering on a large and antiquated city so far in our journey. We have had pretty flat lands and no trouble, though my wagon seems too small now.
The first settlers of Oregon country were missionaries. Though they did not succeed in converting Native Americans to Christians, they did succeed at converting people into believing that Oregon country was paradise. In fact, in 1843, 1,000 pioneers packed their stuffs into wagons and set off to go to Oregon country. A year later, over double that people came and settled here. That's why we're so popular.
The Oregon Trail became popular because it was the main route to the Oregon Territory. It was the route that was used the most by most settlers. It was the route that was the easiest to travel over. And once a route has been established, you really don't want to steer away from that particular route.
The first immigrants to Oregon came by ship before the trail was even established. Ships continued to travel to Oregon even after the overland migration began, but they were not popular among the pioneers. First, the fare for a siege journey to Oregon was quite expensive. Few pioneer families could afford it. Second, most Oregon-bound pioneers came from the central states, far from the seaport. Lastly, the sea journey often took up to a full year versus 4 to 6 months by wagon. Overall, for the pioneers, the wagon journey was a lot easier. For example, these guys.
Oregon was claimed by 4 different nations: Russia, Spain, Great Britain, and the United States. Spain and Russia backed off quickly and left Britain and the United States to govern Oregon country. Some Americans wanted the area really badly, however, Britain still had claims.
Riding time!
We have reached the second checkpoint, Independence Rock. How should I describe it? It's like a big rock. The trail runs right along it, and there is a small lake next to it. This lake allows Independence Rock to be one of the most successful checkpoints on the trail. So far, the journey has become more difficult, but still pretty easy. We have crossed a couple of rivers.
Can we make it? Can we make it? Can we make it? Yeah.
And the trail is starting to become a little bit more bumpy.
What is that? What is that? It's just a twig.
Were based on the Lewis and Clark expedition. Meriwether Lewis thought that many more Americans would follow them. This was wishful thinking. The trail that Lewis and Clark had chosen was way too rigorous for the average American at the time. In 1824, a fur trapper named J.D.S. Smith discovered the South Pass, which was a passage through the Rocky Mountains. The South Pass was an easy, descently sloped trail through the mountains that finally allowed pioneers into Oregon country without too much hassle.
The first section of the Oregon Trail bisected 2 major Native American tribes, the Cheyenne to the north and the Pond to the south. The immigrants worried about both, but the expected attacks did not come. In fact, there were many signs of Native American kindness, helping pulling out stuck wagons, rescuing drowning immigrants, even rounding up lost cattle. Most encounters with Native Americans were simply business transactions. The immigrants offered clothes, tobacco, or rifles in exchange for Native American horses or food. We have reached the uphill section in our journey. Soda Springs is the beginning of the Appalachian Mountains. Soda Springs is near a freshwater spring. This is a very popular checkpoint because it allows travelers to refresh themselves before the hardest part of the journey, the Appalachian Mountains.
In 1844 presidential election, James Polk won by promising people that he would receive Oregon and acquire Texas. His slogan was all of Oregon or none and 50-40 or fight. In the end though, he did not fight 50-40. Polk settled on a treaty, half of Oregon country. Many people were disappointed, but the Eastern lawmakers were fine with it.
Because they felt like if America, they would have the protection of the country. They also felt like we're so far away that it doesn't matter if we're ruled by them, then that would make a difference to them. They wanted to be a part of America because being an American was what they were.
Were a constant source of distress for the pioneers. Hundreds drowned trying to cross Kansas, North Platte, and the Columbia Rivers, among others. In 1850 alone, 37 people drowned trying to cross one particularly difficult river. The great thunderstorms took their toll. A half-dozen immigrants were killed by lightning strikes. Many others were injured by the hail the size of apples. Pounding rains were especially difficult for immigrants because there was no shelter on the open plains and the covered wagons eventually leaked. Perhaps the biggest problem on the trail was a mysterious and deadly disease called cholera, for which there was no cure. Often an immigrant would go from healthy to dead in just a few hours. Sometimes they reached the proper burial, but often the sick would be abandoned in their beds on the side of a trail. They would die alone. Making matters worse were animals that regularly dug up the dead and scattered the trail with human bones and body parts.
Definitely the geography of the trail, right? The open plains, that you have the weather and you're exposed to everything, you don't have any protection. And then the mountains also are a huge feat going over. We even have to shut down our roads today sometimes because of snow that falls on the mountains and cars can't go over. Could you imagine if you were in a covered wagon or on a horse, being pulled by oxen, having, no real protection, no heat, nothing like that. So that was definitely a great hardship experienced by the pioneers.
Wait, isn't this supposed to be a documentary?
Going on the Oregon Trail. We're going on the Oregon Trail. Going on the Oregon Trail. Going on the Oregon Trail. Ha 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 ha! Yeah! Going on the Oregon Trail. Yeah! Thank you. Our documentary. So if you have any questions about the Oregon Trail or Oregon country, please feel free to ask Miss Corcoran. Thanks. See ya.